Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Israel issuing another warning to Hamas. Return our hostages or face terrible consequences, including military action. President Donald Trump promising, I will, quote, tell it like it is in his speech to a joint session of Congress this evening. That speech coming as the president imposes new tariffs on key international trading partners. The battle over transgender treatments for children after the president moved to ban federal funds for hormones and gender surgeries for minors. And the impact of war, an Israeli couple tells CBN News what their lives have been like after they were finally able to come home. All those stories and more right now on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
It's Tuesday. I want to begin this half hour in Israel where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has given a warning to Hamas if they do not release more hostages, saying there will be consequences they can't imagine. And Israel is also again threatening military action against the terrorist group. But hostage families say the government needs to do more so the remaining captives can be set free. Chuck Holton brings us the story. He's reporting from Jerusalem.
Hamas rejected Israel's offer to extend the first phase of the ceasefire over accusations of breaking previous agreements. That rejection led to tough talk from Israeli leadership. Netanyahu and his government say they will not negotiate on Hamas terms and will continue to use all means necessary to pressure the terror group.
I say to Hamas, if you don't release our hostages, there will be consequences you can't imagine.
Defense Minister Israel Katz promised a return to military action if Hamas does not comply.
If Hamas does not release the hostages soon, the gates of Gaza will be locked and the gates of hell will open. We will return to fighting and they will encounter the IDF with might and in ways they have never known. Until complete victory, we will never allow Hamas to control Gaza.
As the threat of escalation grows, Netanyahu reached out to a former hostage with a message of regret. The call comes amid growing criticism from hostage families who say the government's not doing enough to bring their loved ones home.
I understand the enormity of the loss. It's a terrible thing. I also want you to know that I am sorry that it took us so long. We fought hard to get you out, and your brother and the entire family fought hard too.
Arab states are scrambling to come up with their own plan to rebuild Gaza in response to President Trump's suggestion that the Palestinians should be relocated. Egypt proposed a plan seeking to remove Hamas from power and install an interim government backed by Arab states. But the plan leaves many questions unanswered, including who will govern and fund the reconstruction. Meanwhile, tensions continue to rise as Israel steps up military preparations. Troops remain on high alert, and residents of southern Israel brace for a possible escalation in the coming days. Another important event this week, the passing of Dori Gold, a respected Israeli statesman, UN ambassador, and advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu. From Jerusalem, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Here at home, President Trump is making some big moves today. As he promised, he is putting tariffs on products from Canada and Mexico and increasing the prices on imports from China. Those countries are retaliating with tariffs on American goods. The administration has also announced it is pausing military aid to Ukraine. These major actions coming as the president delivers his first speech to a joint session of Congress this evening. CBN News White House correspondent Kelly Wright has the story.
As the country and world wait for President Trump's address to Congress, he stated on Truth Social, "I will tell it like it is." The president will face Congress on the heels of Friday's heated Oval Office encounter with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky. The tense exchange disrupted a planned rare minerals deal between the two countries that Trump predicted would have led to ending the war between Ukraine and Russia. While the president is expected to talk about war, Republican and Democrat members are still reacting to the meltdown.
I was appalled by what happened in the Oval Office. I was with President Zelensky, with a number of Republican and Democratic senators before he left for the White House. He was in great spirits. He was excited to go and sign this minerals agreement, which is something that was very important to President Trump. And I think this actually what's come out of this is not in President Trump's best interest.
I think everybody has to get into a room, so to speak, and we have to make a deal. and the deal can be made very fast. It should not be that hard a deal to make. It can be made very fast. Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal, and if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long.
And the president is moving with breakneck speed to fulfill promises made during the campaign. Through hundreds of executive orders, Trump has literally changed the government, from eliminating DEI programs to targeting waste through DOGE, led by Elon Musk. The president has been cutting the federal workforce, dismissing thousands of civil servants. Democrat leaders in sharp disagreement with these moves have urged members to bring fired federal workers to the joint session to highlight the personal impact of the administration's actions. Expect President Trump to also talk about the priority for securing the southern border by expanding deportations and improving the economy, the top issue for American voters. During his inauguration, Mr. Trump talked about leading the country into a golden age for America, which could be challenging given the narrow Republican majorities in the House and Senate.
One of President Trump's actions has led some to push back. Advocates for the lucrative field of transgender medicine are fighting back after the president moved to ban federal funds for hormones and gender surgeries for children. Those who support the president's move see it as a golden opportunity. Heather Sells explains why.
Just days after the president issued his executive order, trans activists hit the streets of New York in a panic. Analyst Mary Rice Hassan says that's because the Protecting Children from Chemical and Surgical Mutilation order comes with powerful strings attached.
Principally, it's the power of federal funding, saying that organizations, whether it's a hospital, a medical practice, anyone who is taking federal funds, they are now going to feel the squeeze because their institution is going to risk losing federal funds if they choose to continue with these procedures.
It comes down to Trump versus a highly profitable industry. Attorney Sarah Parshall-Perry at the Heritage Foundation estimates doctors typically pocket $8,000 for each pediatric gender surgery.
There are 1,100 clinics and hospitals coast to coast that perform these procedures, and now they're going to have to think long and hard to see whether or not this will be continuously profitable for them to do so.
I was given puberty blockers and testosterone at 13 and had a double mastectomy at 15 years old.
Chloe Cole is one of the most outspoken detransitioners. Now at age 20, she believes Trump's actions mark the beginning of the end for the country's transgender movement. She's also warning, along with other advocates, of the fight before them.
We need to remember also that the left has spent decades building and establishing the current ideology. They're not going to vanish overnight.
Some hospitals have paused these procedures as multiple legal challenges are underway, including one by 18 state attorneys general. It argues that the federal order conflicts with state laws that guarantee access to these treatments. Perry maintains that the order falls within the scope of the president's authority, though she admits that taking down the industry will involve more than just cutting federal money.
I do think it's going to take medical malpractice on a grand scale.
Lawsuits like the one Cole has filed against healthcare giant Kaiser Permanente.
Those of us who have detransitioned need to continue to file lawsuits to hold our doctors accountable.
Hassan says what could help those lawsuits is a federal law expanding the statute of limitations so that young adults can have time to process their trauma and come forward. The medical advocacy group Do No Harm notes one prominent group, the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, has expressed doubts about the effectiveness of trans surgeries for kids. Still, Do No Harm says the public should not ignore the pain that gender confusion can cause.
We understand that these children are really suffering, whether that be with anxiety, depression, autism. These children need care. They need compassionate care from mental health professionals that are free to work in a reality basis.
Heather Sells, CBN News.
Coming up, we're going to go back to Israel, where a couple heard the booms of artillery and saw the damage from shrapnel. They tell CBN News about their surreal experience living through war and the bold declaration they're making by returning home. We're going to hear from them when we come back. Hezbollah rocket fire forced residents of northern Israel to leave their homes for nearly a year and a half. Israel's military lifted those restrictions this weekend, allowing people to move back home. A few residents were allowed to return months earlier, including a couple from one border community. They told CBN's Julie Stahl how the war changed their lives.
Although Barry and Orit Prague live in the north, they quickly felt the impact of the October 7th invasion because her beloved nephew and soldier died fighting Hamas. Born and raised here, Orit tells CBN News she never felt so insecure.
Because we have started hearing the stories from the Gaza, Gaza Strip, I told Barry I want to go. So in that evening, on the 8th, which was Sunday, we packed a small trolley and we went to parents of my daughter-in-law.
Kibbutz Daphna was founded in 1939, nearly 10 years before the State of Israel. And despite all of Israel's wars, it was never fully evacuated until after the October 7th war began.
The anxiety or fear, if you like, of what happened in the Gaza Strip permeated all the way up here, and people thought that the same thing was going to happen from Lebanon, from the Hezbollah.
The Pragues became like wandering Jews living out of their suitcases.
We try to see how we find the good or the strength in the situation.
We became part of the surreal situation, and we gradually adapted, as everybody else did, to this surreal situation, which the people in the north and the south became accustomed to. And it's awful to think that we did become accustomed to, well, I can only describe it as crazy.
Soon after the war began, CBN News visited Kibbutz Daphna, an agricultural community and tourist destination. Community manager Arik Yacobi explained how the community maintained an emergency routine with just a few people milking cows and taking care of the animals. The hotel and camping area were closed, and Hezbollah rocket threats kept them out of their avocado orchards.
During some of the fighting in Lebanon for this place and here, there were a lot of casualties amongst our soldiers.
This area of the kibbutz suffered the most rocket damage. Barry says he hopes the residents here will all return.
So this house was damaged by a rocket that landed right in front of it, and the other houses around it were also damaged by shrapnel, broke windows, destroyed all sorts of stuff inside. Just now we're starting to get back to normal.
Barry and Orit returned last summer in the midst of the fighting.
We see our home as here. And coming back to Daphna, to our home, is sort of a statement, a declaration, A, to the Israeli government, B, to our friends and brothers and sisters in Daphna. We do trust the army. We saw that they were very good. They protected us very well.
Orit's Lithuanian parents helped start the kibbutz, and she felt childlike excitement coming back home.
When we came in June, what Barry said about the surreal feelings going in Daphna, that was in the highest of the prosperity of the kibbutz, until the 6th of October, was very weird.
The surreal part is that we were here in 2006. We stayed here. No one left. Oh, people left, but there was no evacuation. And if you remember the Lebanese war in 2006, there were lots of bombs and artillery and whatever, and there was no Iron Dome, there was nothing like that.
This time they saw a major difference.
Now this time there's artillery, and it was all around us, it was firing every so often. You never knew when. So all of a sudden you'd hear boom, boom. And at night you'd also hear all of a sudden boom. You know, it was like from here to there. But after a while, we didn't wake up. But it's terrible to get used to something like that. That we don't want to be used to that. We want peace and quiet.
Some 350 members have now returned. Volunteers have been cleaning, painting, and preparing for more residents to come home. Agriculture is flourishing again, with other industries operating as they did throughout the war. 2 kindergartens and the elementary school have reopened, and in the coming month, they expect students to return to the high school. Orit is optimistic, saying it's amazing how humans can leave the past and move forward.
What we went here in those months, it was like we were sitting next to cannons bombs all day. And I was afraid to walk in a kibbutz because something would fall on me, and I forgot about it. And I sees the future as a place to live here and to go back to prosperity that Daphna used to have.
While Barry believes there are tough times ahead with the economy, he has hope.
And they founded this kibbutz in 1939, and they built it from nothing, and it was all a swamp and God knows what here. So I just feel that we're going to carry on, and our kids will carry on, and we've got to be optimistic and hope for the best.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Kibbutz Daphna, Northern Israel.
Still ahead, dealing with grief as a teenager. We're going to hear from an expert on how grief affects young people, including their faith. We've got the story for you right after this. Those teen years can be a difficult time emotionally, especially for a young person experiencing grief. On this week's episode of Healthy Living on the CBN News Channel, the author of a new book is talking about issues like teens and funerals, how the body copes with grief, and how it affects their faith. Take a look.
When my husband, Rob, died, he left me a young widow with 4 children to raise on my own. And I have raised them through almost every developmental stage now, through elementary school and junior high, high school, and into college. And my 19-year-old daughter, Fiona, and I paired together to create this resource for teenagers, a resource that we hope will be a good companion for them as they walk through loss for the first time themselves.
And also, in addition to the book, isn't there a 40-day devotional that sort of pairs with it?
Yes, we've got a 40-day devotional that offers meditations on loss and rebuilding, resilience, and resurrection. We also have a workbook for children, a picture book that's coming out in May, and we have an adult resource, Beyond the Darkness, as well. So really trying to create bereavement resources for every stage of the journey, for every person in a family when someone loses a loved one.
Your first book after the untimely death of your husband is called Beyond the Darkness. That's geared mostly towards adults. Your most recent book called Hurt, Help, Hope, geared towards teenagers, that has devotional that's out now. And then this coming spring in May, a children's book on grief, Hope Comes to Stay. So why did you decide to do all these different types of books for different ages in grief?
Well, pretty quickly, as a grieving mom who was raising grieving children, I realized that we weren't experiencing our loss the same. Even though we had lost the same loved one, we were all experiencing it from our own seats on the bus. I was the leader, the new parent, the solo parent. I was the decision maker for the family, and I was the only adult. And I began to see that my adult experience of loss was very different from my children's. But even then, their experience of loss was different as I considered their ages. My youngest had just turned 7 when my husband died, and my oldest was turning 14. And the difference between a little girl's understanding of loss and an emerging teenager's experience of loss, even these were very different. And what we realized as we journeyed over the last 5 years together was that each age group really needed its own tailor-made resources that would accompany them through the hardest parts of the beginning of their loss and help them to see the possibilities for flourishing in the years ahead.
You know, regardless of age, of the age of the grieving person, it's different also when the person they lose is young, and also when the death is sudden and very unexpected, as your husband's were. Can you give us a little bit of background about, and I know this is probably painful for you to talk about, but just to help us understand where you and your family are coming from, what happened to your husband in the hiking accident?
Sure. Yeah. We were in the middle of our family vacation. We were 3,000 miles away from home when 2 police chaplains arrived at my campsite to let me know that my husband had fallen to his death in a hiking accident in the backcountry of a national park. And, this is not what you expect on your family vacation. It's certainly not something you plan space for in the itinerary. And yet we were plunged into a loss that was going to change the rest of our lives. And, while that loss experience is unique to us, there are so many universal qualities to grief that run across our experiences. Whether your person was sick for a long time and you saw death coming, or whether death arrived as a surprise, as it did for us, many of the same feelings come afterwards: a sense of shock, a sense of disbelief, anger, frustration, disappointment, sadness, regret. All of these things are universal to the experience of grief. And that's why we have resources that we can rely on whatever way we come to the loss of our person. And it's something that is a comfort, because grief can make you feel very alone. And so the feelings of isolation that we feel that are a natural result of our loss, we can bridge those divides, bridge those gaps, and find support when we acknowledge some of those universal qualities that all of us experience when we grieve.
And you can hear more about how to handle grief at different ages on this week's edition of Healthy Living. You can find it this evening on the CBN News, this afternoon on the CBN News channel at 2:30, and then this evening at 8:30 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app, or you can watch on YouTube. We're coming back with an encouraging word for your Tuesday. Stay with us. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable, and today I want to leave you with this message to post, tag, and share with those in your circles of influence. What looks dead to you may not be dead in the eyes of God. He can breathe new life into any situation. So now, right now, may be the time to return to that dream that you buried, or the one that you've long forgotten. Never walk away from a door that God never closed. Give it a knock, give it a push, and watch him work. That's going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Thanks for watching.